Welcome along to Perth Property Insider. I'm your host, Jared Mann, and I'm really excited today because I've managed to drag one of my superstar property managers onto the episode, Dwayne Long. He was the REIWA Property Manager of the Year in 2013 and has worked with me for 9 odd years. Absolute powerhouse when it comes to property management, and I really thought it would be valuable to pick his brain on what are we doing day to day to maximize the rents on our Perth properties. And we go through a lot of different aspects and take you inside our property management to show that there is a lot of complexity and a lot of things involved in order to make sure we're getting that very best price for our clients. So I think you're really going to get a lot out of this episode. Let's go inside.
Welcome to Perth Property Insider, where you will learn how to grow your wealth and improve your life using Perth property. Our show is brought to you by Investors Edge Real Estate, the highly rated and award-winning property management specialist servicing the whole of Perth. Now here is your host, Jared Mann.
Hey Dwayne, how you going?
Hey Jared, I'm well. Yourself, mate?
Yeah, I'm doing well. I know it's a bit strange. We talk to each other all day, but I wanted to grab you on this podcast and talk about some of the crazy things that we're seeing in our Perth market at the moment. Wouldn't you say we haven't seen this in a long while?
Yeah, I think it'd been 5, maybe 6 years since we've seen activity like this. It's absolutely amazing.
So what kind of numbers are we seeing in our home opens and what's the activity looking like on the ground?
It's busy. There's a lot of tenant inquiry and we're getting 10, 20 lots of tenants coming through in a home open, which is really boding well for our owners. But there is fierce competition to try and secure rentals for the tenants out there.
Yeah, it's pretty rough if you're a tenant at the moment, but nice to have the tables turned in favour of the landlord for once, hey?
Yeah, 100%, 100%.
I've always said that in a downward market, you have to have a lot of the difficult conversations and you're always going to your clients with often bad news, even when you do everything right. And at the moment, it's making our property managers look like heroes, isn't it?
Yeah, it sure is. That's the way the market is at the moment. And we've just got to enjoy it while we can.
Yeah, make hay while the sun shines is my current saying. So you hear me use that around the office a bit.
I've heard it a lot, yes.
So what sort of properties are in demand at the moment? Is it completely across the board or is it some more in demand than others?
Generally speaking, nicer looking properties in nicer locations nearer the CBD have been in more demand. So anywhere between sort of 10 to 15 Ks from the CBD, with the only outlier at the moment being apartments. Well, because there's been a lot of stock, particularly say in East Perth, the demand hasn't been quite up to speed there, but it is starting to get a little bit better for owners in that area. But yeah, predominantly it's landed properties, 15 kilometres out from Perth.
Yeah, and we've also seen those coastal suburbs do incredibly well. All the family-friendly areas, anything pretty much that's got good schools and good amenities is definitely going nuts. Yeah. And yeah, as you point out, we are starting to see the West Perth and East Perth markets tighten up that previously had that big flood of Airbnb properties and short-term properties come back to the long-term pool. Yeah, so I mean, they're not seeing too many tourists at the moment, are they?
No, not at all.
So yeah, that has actually tightened up really quick, and we're starting to see leasing times get back down to 2 to 3 weeks, but the others are often going in their first week, aren't they?
Yeah, that's it. 1 or 2 viewings, and we've already got a couple of successful applicants really eager to get their lease started.
So I know from seeing the numbers behind the scenes, we're often going to a home open and having sometimes 5 applications already on the table before tenants have seen it. Now that's crazy, isn't it?
Yeah, I haven't seen those numbers for 5 or 6 years now, but tenants are definitely putting their best foot forward early on and trying to submit applications so they can secure a spot even before they view the property. So yeah, it's a good time. It's a good time for us investors at the moment.
So I guess if you're a landlord and you might be self-managing or thinking about self-managing your property, or if you're considering more going with a local agent who doesn't specialize in property management, why might you even consider choosing a specialist such as us to do the job when it is so easy to find tenants? You know, I've seen a whole bunch of crappy marketing still out there, and it's probably doing the job, isn't it, Dwayne?
Well, I guess finding tenants is one thing, but qualifying tenants is another. And I guess a lot of our clients who choose to use us is because they do want that peace of mind and that they can trust someone to look after their asset like it's their own. So they don't have to want to worry about doing the viewings. They don't want to have to worry about screening people. And to be honest, Jared, some people are not very good at screening people. So I guess at the end of the day, why someone would choose a specialist like us is because it's the long-term journey that we're in for. And it's those small little things that we can do during that journey that make a big difference to the overall profitability of that investment vehicle. And it's just something so simple like getting an extra $10 or even $20 a week because of our marketing, because of our negotiations. You might think $20 a week isn't a lot, but over a year, that's a grand. And it'd be reasonable to say people holding an investment property, holding for long-term, 10, 15 years, if it's a grand a year over 10 years, that's 10 grand. So it's nothing to be sneezed at. And I think that it's really important to get your marketing right, being proactive, being on the front foot. And that's just one little example of the things that we do that really boost your returns over a longer period of time.
Yeah, for sure. And I know myself, sometimes 10, $20 a week extra can be the difference between being negatively geared and positively geared, and also the difference of paying for your property manager before they've even really gotten started. So it does add up.
That's
make
it,
a big difference.
That's it.
So what should people be doing, or at least ensuring that their property manager is doing, to attract a lot of, the most interest they can in this market? So is there some things that you suggest? I know we've got a pretty, great marketing package. Just run us through that.
Yeah, so I guess probably the most important thing is making sure you've got the exposure for your property. If you're on the wrong platform, if you're on Gumtree, you're probably going to attract a certain type of tenant. So we want to make sure, number one, that you're on the right platforms for advertising. And that speaks to a marketing funnel that we measure weekly, but we'll go into that a little bit later, perhaps. In relation to what people should be doing, I think that the front hero image is really, really critical to getting those clicks as well. So if your hero image or your first image is one of a toilet, it doesn't really show your property off very well. It's not going to turn people on to click that ad. Yeah, that's it. Who wants to rent a property when the hero photo, the best photo is the toilet? So, that's probably the first thing. But the second thing that we like to do and make sure that we do any property coming on board is a video. And, doing video tours really helps tenants get a feel for the property. And that's why we are getting applications before they see it.
Yeah.
Personally, is because the video's there, So I think that makes a big difference to people out there, the tenants searching.
There's still that apprehension out there, even though we live in our own bubble and COVID's kind of in the background. I think it's pushed everyone more towards technology. And now if you don't have a walkthrough video and someone can't check it out, heaven forbid, without getting off the couch and potentially, running into another human being, they've got to, you don't have a video, you're seriously not putting your property out there in the best way possible, are you?
Yeah, that's it, exactly. So I think the hero photo is very, very important. The video is important, but also getting quality photos throughout. That's what's going to entice people to actually come down and have a look. If your property photos are from, 2010 and there's a date stamp on the bottom corner and, you look at these kind of adverts out there, it doesn't show the property off necessarily in its best light. And the idea is to try and capture as much interest as you can. We're not fudging the photos, we're not going to go and use a fisheye lens and make the room bigger than it is, but we really want to present it in its best light. And I think that's the best way to attract those tenants, is be honest, be genuine, but show it in its best way.
Yeah. And what I've always explained to clients is throw as much at it almost as if you would a sale. Rentals were seen as the poor cousin of the real estate world. And 5 years ago, you'd be lucky if someone took a few photos on their phone and chucked it up. These days, you need professional quality photography that's professionally produced. And, you can take a little bit of creative license with making the green a bit nicer in the lawn and adding a nice image to the TV screen in the living area. And, all these things add to the emotional appeal of the property and get more tenants in the door. And we've certainly known, because we've been pushing it uphill the last 3 to 5 years, and we had to do every
possible
single
thing.
every single thing possible to get them there. So it
That's it.
definitely is works then, and it's working now to have the best quality tenants to choose from.
Yeah, exactly.
So explain this marketing funnel, and I find it a really good way of an investor picturing what's happening with their property marketing and how the market's responding. So take us through that and what an investor should be expecting to know that
Yeah,
it's
definitely.
working.
So just like any marketing, whether you're marketing a business or a product, we want to know where different people are at in the funnel. And that way we can move those people closer towards the outcome, which is what we're trying to achieve, an application. So when we're talking about our marketing funnel, the top of the funnel for us is the exposure. So how many online clicks have you had? How many people have actually seen this ad? If that exposure number is too low, doesn't matter what price you're asking, you've only got a small market to play with. So the idea is that for us anyway, we're hoping to get 800 clicks per week. And we measure our marketing funnel between Friday to Thursday every week. And the idea is once you've had 800 clicks, you're hoping to get a conversion ratio to about 8 people who call you, 4 people who come to the property, and from the 4 people who come, 1 person will actually apply. Now, it's not to say that we can't manipulate that funnel. I mean, take for example, let's say a 3-2 and Nolamara is going for 360 a week. If we were to ask 400 a week, then you still might have 800 clicks at the top, but the conversion ratio, because tenants don't see value in it, might only be 2 or 3 people inquiring a week. Whereas the opposite, if we drop that price to $300 a week, tenants suddenly see a lot of value in that. And from your 800 clicks, you're getting 30, 40, 50 people inquiring on the property. So by gauging that marketing funnel, within a few days, we can quickly tell if we've priced it right, if we've got the right exposure. And not always is it about price, because as I alluded to earlier, if your exposure is incorrect and you're only getting 100 people clicking a week, you're just never going to get the kind of response that's required to get an application a week.
So I guess it really helps us, work out that we need, if our marketing's right, then we can be sure that it is more about price. Is that right?
That's right. That's right. Exactly.
Yeah, great. And what happens if you do get 30 people along to an open and you might have underpriced it? How do you start to handle this situation? Because we don't want our owners missing out on extra rent, do we?
Definitely not. I mean, the volume of people that come to a viewing puts pressure on others to make a decision quickly.
Yeah,
and
definitely.
When that happens, it's a genuine thing. We're not asking for more money, but if we say, hey guys, you can see there's a fair bit of interest here. If you really want to secure this property, put your best foot forward. And people know what that means. It might be a little bit more money. It could be a bit more money, but it could be things like slightly longer lease term, or starting the lease sooner, or paying a little bit extra up front. Now, we're not going to necessarily say this is what you have to do to secure the property, but we're just going to reiterate the fact that it's got to be the best offer, because we just want to make sure that if you want it,
what can you do to make your application as strong as possible?
That's right.
So how do you go about even setting a price in this upward market? Because if we go and look at what's rented 2 months ago, 3 months ago, we're clearly getting outpaced by the market. The data is, and the data's old. So, it is a bit of an art in setting the pricing. How are you seeing our team all do it?
Yeah, so in speaking with the team and making sure that everyone's getting the pricing right from the get-go, what we're doing is looking at data from 1, 2, 3 months ago, yesterday's data. And I guess for a property manager, that's using RP data and looking at what properties actually achieved. But that's yesterday's data. And as you said, Jared, it's one of those things that where the market's moving so quickly that data is outdated quite quickly. So not only do we look at yesterday's data, we'll look at today's data. What are other properties on the market currently asking for similar homes, which I think a lot of people do, tenants do that too. But where we future-proof ourselves a little bit is we look at the vacancy rate for that area. And when we look at the vacancy rate, as we know, the vacancy rate is the leading indicator to price. So if the vacancy rate is low, price is going to come up because of the pressure. So when we look at that vacancy rate and see vacancy rates around 1% around so many suburbs in Perth.
Yeah, well, anything under 3%, we're seeing increases in price. And with things being at 0.9% now across the board, I mean, if you look and you see it, it's 0.5% or even, and you do need to take it case by case. That's why it's such a great approach there. You need to know the area, you need to know what it is there, and then tailor what you're setting for your price accordingly, don't you?
Well, that's it. And I guess it's not just looking at one set of those bits of data. We're looking at past, we're looking at present data, and we're predicting future data by looking at the vacancy rate. And by looking at that trend, we can see how fast that price is increasing. And therefore, we can predict what we should be asking for today to get that marketing funnel flowing well, and making sure we're maximising the returns and maximising the rent for our clients.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So a bit of crystal ball stuff in there too.
Oh, a little bit.
What happens if you get it wrong? What happens if you're on 3-4 days and you don't get any inquiries at all? Is that the end of the world?
Well, that's why we've got the marketing funnel, Jared. We're not going to wait for 3 or 4 weeks to make an adjustment. I mean, the marketing funnel tells us.
You'd be surprised out there, wouldn't you? How long?
Yeah, no.
Especially when agents aren't referring to the data, aren't looking back at their inquiry levels. It's just head in the sand. 2 weeks pass, potential vacancy if they're renting their property out for the first time, and they then come back asking for a price revision without any justification for it. So
yeah, that's it.
So is there anything investors can do to improve the property and the price that they might get? I mean, is that even worthwhile doing at the moment?
Look, I mean, if you come along with a pretty nice looking property, there's not much that you want to invest. I mean, you're going to overcapitalize in some instances. So it's a very delicate balance. And I think it's one of those things that, to give that kind of advice, you sort of need to see the property. You need to go in and have a look and try and line that up to what the demographic in that area wants. So it is a bit of a open-ended question, and how long is a piece of string kind of thing. But, what investors can do to get the most from their rental properties at the moment is just to make sure that, they have low vacancy rates, but also the fact that you've got someone on your side who can actually negotiate and talk to tenants and understand why they're at the property in the first place. Because if you understand the why of their decision making, you can bring that right back. And that's it. And then that's probably the best thing you're going to do. I mean, repainting the walls, it's maintenance. It's going to make it look a little bit better, but you're not going to get an extra 40 or 50 bucks for repainting the walls. So it is a delicate balance. And it's just, as I said, coming back to it, giving tenants what they want. And they're the times when, you're going to get a really good bang for buck.
Of course, we've found over the years that with setting a minimum standard to the properties that we take on and that we manage, it then makes it a lot easier to maintain and hold the tenants to that standard, doesn't it? So, what are some of those things that you're requiring of any new landlord that comes to us? Where do you want to get it to?
Well, it has to be clean. I mean, that's a pretty straightforward
Basics.
one. It's got to be clean, because some things,
I guess
clean
everyone's
dirty.
definition of clean can be a little different too.
I believe personally, Jared, that it's either clean or it's dirty. There's a bit of dust on there, it's dirty. That's it. And I think that a lot of us tend to agree in that way too. But if you give a property to a tenant in a way that's somewhat clean, then it's not clean, right? And by having that property at that top standard of everything has been cleaned, even the top of door frames, even the light fittings, that way when the property comes back from the tenant, it's got to meet that standard as well. So cleaning is really, really important. And it also means that the property presents better to tenants and prospective tenants as they're coming through. So clean's number one. And look, I guess other things that we want to make sure is that, if you've got big gardens, is it reticulated? Are we going to incorporate some kind of monthly lawn mowing service? Because these things, I guess, can be quite difficult for a tenant to maintain. And it's a lot harder to get. That's right.
It's just human nature.
Right. Yeah, so and once the grass grows, it's very difficult to replace. Yeah, that's it. As much low maintenance as possible, but sometimes it is difficult for certain properties for that to happen. And most importantly, I guess the property just has to be up to maintenance. There shouldn't be massive amounts of maintenance outstanding. Having those maintenance issues dealt with early on, getting it all sorted out, makes things a lot easier for us to manage.
It's annoying for anyone when they move into a property.
That's right.
To find, the toilets aren't flushing correctly, lights aren't wired here and there, and the retic's not working. And, I know it can be frustrating for a new landlord when we require these things, but you get them up there, you get them sorted, and then you can hold the tenants to them on the back end. And, you have a happy tenant and you have a long tenant too that stays a long time. So.
That's right. Yeah. They usually come and rent a property because they like the property. So if we can continue to build on that relationship, not only will they continue to stay at the property, because of the property. They also stay because of us. You know, they love the relationship and how things are fixed. And, you know, they also love the landlord, which makes a big difference to how long tenants actually stay around for.
Yeah, for sure. So is there any major negatives that you definitely need to correct in a property, you know, to rent it out? Is there anything that's gonna make it harder?
Anything that's going to make it harder. Again, it's case by case. You walk into a property and something's just glaring at you that you
Well,
need
I can
to
think of a few.
rectify.
If you haven't got any, have I
Yeah,
stumped you
go
a little
for
bit?
it. A little bit on this one.
Yeah, well, I just think to our absolute, you know, non-negotiables, and that's aircon leading into the summer period. I
Yep.
once rented a property without air conditioning as a bachelor. I even think to check until 6 months later we hit summer, and I was having to go sleep over at my parents' place. It was that hot, and the owner wasn't willing to put AC in, even when I offered to pay half. But that's
out of
another
control.
story. I was a pretty ignorant bachelor at the time, but yeah, my wife would never have us move into a property without AC, and I have learnt my lesson since too. So, but what is there anything else other than air conditioning that you can think of that is an absolute must that a property needs, or that makes it harder to rent? I know from, if you want to attract the higher quality tenants, having an open carport without any external gates can be a real negative, or not having any
Yeah,
carport
secure parking
at
essentially.
all
Yeah,
is a big one. And then
it's one of those ones though, Jared, that it's not impossible, but it's a lot harder to
it's hard.
remedy that issue. Air conditioning, a couple of $1,000, you should be able to put something in. But, you know, if you're looking at boxing up a carport, 9 times out of 10, you need the council approval. So it's not an easy one to get through. Other major negatives.
And look, it does depend on your market, because, you know, a lot of any tenant that's had a dishwasher will not go back to not having a dishwasher. You know, like I would never live in a property without a dishwasher.
But, you know, one of the things we do with dishwashers is, say we do rent a property 3-2 that's just newly been built and there's no dishwasher as part of the handover. Rather than getting the owner to spend another $500 straight off the bat, we market the property as is. And as tenants come through, we ask a very important question. We say, is there anything stopping you from applying for this property? And, you know, if the example comes back, oh, look, we would rent it in a heartbeat, but it's got no dishwasher, and, you know, me and the missus fight about washing the dishes all the time. Well, great. We understand there's the one thing stopping them. Mr. Tenant, if we put a dishwasher in here before you moved in, would you be happy with that? Yeah, we'll take the property. Great. Understanding that we've marketed the property at a certain price without the dishwasher, would you pay $10 more a week for it? Is that worth the argument with your wife? And, you know, usually we can get that through. And if we're getting an extra $10, simple,
ask
$10
them
a
how
week,
much they'd be interested in paying, and you might be surprised. So
that's an
and of
extra
course,
$520, isn't it?
Yeah, you could go and get one on a interest payback plan, and, you know, get an extra $500 in your first year, and average tenant with us stays typically 3 years, so you're up a grand by the end of your tenancy. So
exactly
yeah, great one. So with this COVID emergency period, obviously very, very difficult in managing existing tenancies. Not in the sense that we've had a lot of problems, but more in the sense that only approximately 1% of tenants have been affected. And yeah, they definitely need special treatment and all the support we can give them. But the 99% of tenants that haven't been affected by COVID have really been sheltered by this emergency period, putting a hold on rents. So, you know, we had 200 rental increases sent out come 29th of September, and we had to retract them all because the emergency period got extended to the 28th of March. So yeah, lots of government thought they'd wait till the very last minute when we'd done all the work.
Yeah, that was a blow.
Sent all the rental increases. But look, you can't hold back a market indefinitely, and you can't, every time you put outward forces and controls on things, ultimately, you know, it does have unintended consequences as well. So where does that leave landlords, I guess, with an existing tenant? How do you see us managing things from here as we get to this end of the emergency period on the 28th of March?
Well, I guess as long as the government doesn't decide to extend that period again, which, let's be honest, it's not,
isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the chances aren't really high that they will. Its chances are, given everything that's going on, the moratorium period will end. If that happens, then of course we're going to be looking to increase the rents where possible with tenants that are currently sitting in rental properties paying far under what the market is suggesting is fair. We're not being silly. We're not being exorbitant. It's just
So
the fact that
where have you seen rents go to in typically? I mean,
okay, to give you an example, a property
yeah,
rented in 2018 in Baldivis, and at the time, 310 was a very competitive price for this type of property. 300 was roughly where the market was at, so not a bad price at the time. Now, only a couple of months back, that tenant did choose to vacate, which is great. But when we went to market, looking at the past, present, and the future data set, as we mentioned earlier, we started asking 360 per week. That's close to 20% more. And when we did that, we still had 10 people come to our first viewing. So we got that one leased pretty quickly too. And, for that client, they're pretty happy. They're pretty chuffed with themselves because they've managed to increase their returns by, almost 20%. So predominantly through all of Perth in areas where supply is a little bit, I suppose, low, stock is low, it's not impossible to see a 20% rental increase for some of these properties. So yeah, I mean, I think that with the COVID emergency period ending, it's going to be a delicate balance between landlords as well and the tenants, because we don't want to jump that rent too much and upset tenants and, sour a good relationship. But at the same time, we still need to make sure that we're getting the returns that we possibly can from our investment vehicles.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a delicate balance, and that's where your property manager should be giving that kind of advice. Like us would be giving that kind of advice to all our clients, saying it's worth doing this. These are the pros and cons, and yeah, I guess that's where we have to go from here.
I guess we've just been focusing a lot on educating the tenants as they go over the last 5 years, so they knew, and let's face it, the average person these days can work out rents pretty quickly thereabouts where they're at. So if they jump online and see that it's going to be, a comparably higher amount for them to rent elsewhere, then I think everyone does understand that they're going to have to pay more for their existing property. And when rents did drop 22%, they've had it pretty well for so long, and many tenants have, they're certainly used to being the one with the control, aren't they? So all
that's
tenants
it.
are used to that. So,
but just to reiterate, we do respect all of our tenants, right? It's not
definitely.
that trying to rip them off or anything. It's just the fact that for a lot of investors who have purchased property over the past few years, before even the market decided to have its little dip, they've purchased with a return in mind, the goal of building an investment portfolio, the goal of getting ahead for themselves. And during that period, as rents were dropping, of course, landlords are doing the fair thing, having to get the property rent. They've got to drop the price to where the market was
and
at.
they did it. And look, all of our clients also did the right thing by their tenants in order to keep a great one too. And we've certainly appreciated maintaining our long-term relationships with the tenants that we have. And, many of them have been stuck with us. Even when they move to our other properties and stick with us. So we do love our tenants and have a great relationship with them. But yeah, as things increase, we do have to have that balancing act and start passing it on, because what would you rather it to keep in line with market and, bring those smaller increases, I guess, in line with market as you go and fit it into your budget? Or would you rather a big shock where you have to go and move out and pay more and it is better to keep it in line and then everyone's on a fair and even page?
Yeah, I think transparency is really important. Just speaking to both parties, understanding where the market actually is, that makes a big difference. And having that open dialogue and great communication with both parties is part of our service. And that's what we like to do, is make sure that, both parties are respected. Of course, we always look out for the owner because we're working for them directly, but nonetheless, by having a great relationship with your tenants as well,
can make a big difference. I guess all the heavy lifting's done in the relationship that you create beforehand and the rapport that you have going into that conversation. Right. And of course, for other property managers that might have a more adversarial relationship, they don't have that credit with the tenant to draw on, and they can often be drawing negative and really struggling to.
It can create conflict. Yeah, it can definitely create conflict, and that's what we try to avoid where we can by having good nurturing relationships. Yeah.
Well, Dwayne, thanks for chatting through all these ways to maximise rent in this rapidly increasing Perth market. I know we're in for a serious ride ahead and much more exciting times for all of our clients. And yeah, it's certainly a great time to be getting into the Perth market if you're considering investments. So thanks for chatting with me today.
No worries, Jared. I'll speak to you tomorrow.
Might also get you back for a future episode if you're lucky.
Oh, looking forward to it, mate.
Thanks, mate. See ya.
All right. See ya. Bye-bye.